first one is a few slides long, and guys, I'm not a nozzle head. I'm not an herbicide expert. I have a herbicide applicator certification, but not at the commercial scale. And some of the things I'm going to show you, I'm sharing with you for general information, but it won't be on the final exam, okay? And I'll try to point out the stuff that it's good for you to see, beware of. These are ways that we think of herbicides. These are categories that we consider, and if you ever need to look it up, you'll know what the heck that they're talking about, okay? There are some things that you wouldn't know, and I'll point those out too. Herbicides is big business, and because of that, companies, they put a whole lot of money into advertising, and so the brand names that are making a lot of money get prime shelf space, and companies will try to push a lot of brand names on you and stuff. In the 80s, there were about 20 companies. By 2002, it was down to 8. And today, there are 4 companies that represent about 60% of the global market in herbicide sales. So those 4 companies are big, and you've heard of those. Syngenta, Bayer, BASF. Corteva is I think a conglomerate of a joint not too long ago. But so when I say things like the generic name of Roundup, it's glyphosate. If you can get the generic, you can save a whole lot of money, and you're making the same thing. So just like for your own pharmaceuticals, if they have a generic, you can save a lot by using it. So an herbicide is a type of pesticide. A pesticide is something that kills a pest. A pest is something that we don't want. So insecticides, fungicides, rodenticides, piscicides. What do piscicides kill? Fish. Okay. And what's the pesticide we know of? Anybody know? No, it's rotenone. Yeah. And then herbicides is of course what anything that kills plants. So some characteristics. Selectivity of a herbicide refers to whether it kills one specific very narrow group of plants versus a broad range of plants. A selective herbicide such as 2,4-D kills broadleaf plants but not grasses. So if you've got, where we went to Tyson the other day, if you had heavy encroachment of forbs and you wanted to kill back some forbs so the grasses could come on, you could spray strips of 2,4-D to kill back the forbs so the grasses would be released to do better. Non-selective is often called broad spectrum herbicides that kill a broad spectrum of taxa. So glyphosate kills everything. Herbicides can be contact, that is they kill on direct contact with the plant, or systemic. They move through the plant takes them up, and they might move into the roots or into the canopy or one way or the other. So a contact herbicide, you have to have really good contact. It has to make contact with the leaves or with the trunk because that's where it kills it. Systemic, not so much. There's some herbicides you can spray, and it rains on the ground and the plant's roots take it up. It's moving through the plant. So it's not as critical that you get good contact with wherever it's supposed to contact. And it's important to pay attention to how persistent an herbicide is, how long it sticks around. One nice thing about glyphosate is it breaks down in several days. It's decomposed within a few weeks. So it's not going to continue to kill stuff that you don't want to kill. There are other herbicides, triclopyr and others, tree killers, that will stay active. They'll persist in the soil for weeks or even months, and they can keep on, as it rains, flowing downhill, plants taking them up, keep on killing trees and such for a long time that you might not want to kill. So it's important to be aware of that and be cognizant of, okay, I don't want to kill a whole stand of beautiful oaks downhill of where I'm spraying these sweet gums. There's differences in when we spray herbicides related to plant. Has anybody used the little garden pellets called Preen? Have you seen that? Like in the little jug of things in the lawn and garden section of Walmart or Rural King. You can spray it on your garden, and they're little pellets. And what they do is when it rains, they keep seeds from germinating in the first place. So that's called a pre-emergent, before the plant emerges from the seed, before the plant germinates. A post-emergent is after the seed germinates and while the plant is growing, and the post-directed is directed to a particular portion of the plant once it's emerged and grown. So some might be foliar application, some might be basal application. Post-emergent usually just sprayed over the whole plant. So these are all different terms that are sometimes used, and that's what they mean. And I think I've already covered those first three just now. Spot application is when you spray in a particular area. That could be, we talk about spot spraying, like you're an intern and they send you out in the field to spot spray patches of alligator weed, or wherever you've got thistle growing in the field if they don't want it. You're just killing those patches or those individual plants. Then it can also, you're spraying a particular area on a plant. I kill privets on my property in a lot of different ways. If they're about 3 or 4 feet tall or less, I'll pull them out, especially when the soil is moist. But what's the danger of doing that? If I leave a little bit of root in the soil, privets will grow back from that. So the nice thing about spraying is that it'll kill the whole plant and it's not going to come back from the root, but it costs a whole lot more money to do that, right? So if it's a little plant, and I don't want to risk it coming back, spray it. If it's 4 or 5 or 6 feet tall, maybe too big for me to pull out. So I cut it down to the ground, and I'll spray about a 50% concentration of glyphosate on the stump, on the little stump. If it's big, I could do that again, but what's a little bit easier is instead of spraying glyphosate, I spray a woody plant killer, triclopyr, for about the bottom 12 to 15 inches all around the trunk. And that kills about 90% of them over the next several months. So that's spot spraying basal application. And then you got injected or inoculated, what people call hack and squirt. But remember, that is a jargon term, and even biologists will use it as if that's the official term. And that is jargon terminology if you want to sound professional. Inoculation. Okay, and then you can back it up with that. So these are examples of how we spray. Okay, broadcast spraying with a boom sprayer, like we showed you with a four-wheeler. There's a little four-wheeler boom sprayer. We can spray with a backpack sprayer or a handheld sprayer. If we're doing hack and squirt, just with a little bottle, it doesn't take much at all. So these are all examples of different applications, different herbicides. So formulations, herbicide can come as a liquid or as a dry solution. The liquid can be what's called an emulsifiable concentration. It's where water carries particles of the herbicide itself. And emulsifiable means it can be combined with other stuff, with other herbicides or liquid fertilizers. Flowable, it's not particles, it is a liquid itself. Okay, so it's not being carried in water, it is the liquid. Dry can be a powder, a wettable powder, a dry flowable, or a granular like the preen I was talking about. These are terms that you might see, and frankly, it wouldn't be too hard for you to stump me if you start asking me what's the difference between dry flowable and wettable and soluble. I'm not sure. So it's not that important to me, but just know those are terms that we use. You won't see this on the exam, but a lot of the time people ask about, well, we want to be sure it kills in a certain way. What is the mode of action? How does it kill? It can regulate plant growth. It can stop it from photosynthesizing. It can stop it from creating pigment that it needs for photosynthesis. It can It can either regulate or inhibit plant growth. It can make it stop synthesizing amino acids. It can make it stop synthesizing lipids. It can burst the cell membrane or do other things that maybe they don't understand or that we don't know, and that's kind of scary. So there's all sorts of ways that they can work. You won't see this on the example, sometimes there. Other considerations. Sometimes you might have private land that's certified an organic farm, and they say, I want to get rid of exotic plants, but we can't use inorganic herbicides. We have to use organic herbicides. These can be things like acids, like citric acid or some other acids, or there's some plant extracts, that lemongrass and others that can be used. Usually they're not quite as effective, they're often more expensive, but that might be one of our best options if it's a certified organic farm. We sometimes use the term tank mix. If a large scale operation is going to be putting out one type of herbicide for one type of plant, another type of herbicide for another type of plant, and fertilizer, rather than run over that property 3 separate times, if we can put everything in the tank together and just run over it once and save the fuel, they would rather do that, right? So there's some herbicides that can't be mixed together or mixed with fertilizers, but some can. So tank mixes are those considerations where we can put various things together, okay? Trade name refers to the name given by a particular brand. So Kleenex is the trade name, of a type of a tissue, right? Advil is a trade name for a type of, for one brand of ibuprofen. So when we say trade name, Roundup is the first one that made glyphosate, but you can buy lots of different trade names of glyphosate, and any of the ones that, other than the one that came first, are probably going to be a lot cheaper, right? Cornerstone, there's lots of others. Active ingredient is what's in it. The herbicide family or class is often how it works. Mechanism of action, mode of action is how it works. Herbicide family or class, I've even gone over and won't worry about that part. Adjuvants refers to stuff that we put in the tank with the herbicide, and some of them are activators, and some of them do additional stuff. Activators come in 3 main categories. Surfactants, it's something that makes the herbicide stick and stay on the leaf. So if you spray it, like a privet leaf has a little bit of a glaucous or waxy coating, and sometimes, if you spray water on it, it'll just drip right off. So a surfactant makes it stick. And a lot of herbicides have the surfactant in there already. I mean, most of the generic glyphosates do. Spray oils serve a similar purpose as surfactants, and there's plant oil extracts that are usually combinations between, spray oils are usually combinations between surfactants and plant oil extracts that do that job of making it stay on the surface. And then another type of activator is a fertilizer that makes the herbicide work more effectively. It provokes the plant to metabolize more quickly, and in doing so, it takes up the herbicide more quickly, right? Special purpose adjuvants come in a variety of types, like an anti-foam agent. Anybody ever dumped herbicide in the tank and then started filling it up with water and it foamed over, like a bad beer. So that keeps that from happening. Drift control agents. Anybody seen where you spray herbicide on a field and the wind carries it into your 60 feet of native warm season grass and kills it all, right? So drift control agent makes it heavy so it doesn't float on the wind. It goes straight down much more quickly. Spray indicator is a dye. So when I was using triclopyr on dozens of privets on my property this big around, at first I would spray them and it was clear like water, and once it dried I couldn't remember which of these dozens of things I'd sprayed, so I put a dye in it and I can tell, okay, I've already sprayed that one. So that's useful for spot spraying. Or where's the line, if I'm broadcast spraying, so that I don't overlap and waste money or miss games. Compatibility agents, if I'm making a tank mix with 2 or 3 together, they might not go together unless I add this agent that allows them to mix together effectively. So if you've ever opened the label on a herbicide, it opens up in this huge thing with very small text, and it takes a lot of time to decipher, but it can go into all this stuff about compatibility agents and what to use for drift control and so forth. So ways that we often screw up with herbicides is we allow drift to happen, and like I said, that can get into a neighbor's property, it can get into a very expensive, CRP planting or native grass planting or something like that. So controlling drift is really important. Cleaning equipment. The general rule they say when you finish using sprayers is triple rinse out 3 times. And that includes not just the tank, but the tubes, the sprayers, the nozzles, everything as well. One of my colleagues in the department was doing some research on some produce this summer and killed all the produce because they're pretty sure that the person who used the sprayer before them did not properly rinse the equipment, and they sprayed herbicide instead of in something that she was trying to spray fertilizer out of. So yeah. Follow the label instructions about when to apply, not when it's too hot, not when it's too cold. Follow the recommended rate. The recommended rate is not a minimum amount. It's what works well, and anything extra is wasting money and potentially environmentally damaging. So follow the rate recommendations. And then people they do tank mixes without reading all that fine print to find out, oh no, you need a compatibility agent or this isn't going to work. Okay. You don't need to memorize this. These are some commonly used herbicides in habitat management, but there's many, many more. Glyphosate we've talked about. It's really pretty cheap. You can get it for cheap, but depending on what you're doing, the cost can become very high. Imazapic and glyphosate together is used because it kills a lot of stuff except for warm season grasses. Imazapic without the glyphosate does a similar thing. Sulfasulfuron, such as Outrider, is pretty expensive. It does a similar thing. 2,4-D just controls broadleaves. It's really cheap. It's been around for a long time. It's very well established and super for controlling broadleaves and releasing grass. So you spray that on corn because corn is in what family?
Poaceae.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Poaceae, it's grass. Imazapyr or Imazapic, or for woody control, it can get really expensive. But this is where we're spot spraying big trees sometimes. Okay, I talked about this in lab the other day. I have it here, and you can come back to this to study for the final. To calibrate a sprayer, we use the 1 to 28 method. So the spray rate, or gallons per acre, is determined by measuring the output of a solution at a given speed over a measured area. And the general recommendation, what we hope, is that we're spraying about 10 to 30 gallons per acre, and our nozzles are spraying at about 20 to 40 psi. Most of them hopefully should be doing that. So the simplest way to do it is just to spray an acre. Fill up your tank with 50 gallons or 30 gallons or 15 gallons, spray an acre, see how many gallons are left, right? If it's a 50-gallon tank and you've got 30 gallons of water left, you use 20 gallons. So it's 20 gallons an acre is your spray rate. But without having to go through that whole process, you can use the 1 to 128 method. This is what I told you the other day. The first thing you do with the 1 to 28 method is measure how far apart are the nozzles of your sprayer, right? If they're 40 inches apart, then you measure a distance of 102 feet. You drive 102 feet, you drive that course at the rate you'll be spraying, and you count how many seconds it takes you to do that, right? Then you you hold a measuring cup under one of your nozzles and spray, just water, out of that nozzle for that amount of time. So if it took you 55 seconds to drive that 102 feet, you hold a measuring cup under that nozzle for 55 seconds. And however many ounces of water you collect, that's equal to the gallons per acre spray rate. So if you get 8 ounces, you're spraying 8 gallons per acre. It's kind of cool, right? Once you get that information, the next thing you do, okay, I just said all that, you divide your tank size by what you just got to get number of acres that's covered by a tank. So if you got a 55-gallon tank, and you say you got 10 gallons per acre, 50 divided by 10 is
5.
50 divided by 10 is, yeah, 5. Yeah, you got 5. So your tank covers 5 acres, right? And then you multiply your herbicide rate by the number of acres that you need to cover. So you read the label of your herbicide, and if it says you're supposed to put 2 quarts per acre, and your tank covers 5 acres, 2 times 5 would be 10 acres. In this case, 2 times 3 would be, would be 2 times 5 is 10 quarts. In this case, 2 times 3 is 6 quarts. And you just put that in your empty tank, fill the rest with water, and you're good to go for that distance. That's how you formulate for broadcast spraying. That's how you calibrate a sprayer. Good? Okay, so what I have here is an exercise. You don't have to do it now, but you can take it home and practice it. The answer is on the back, so don't cheat, okay? But that hopefully can help you so that when you see this the next time you do that for it. It's pretty straightforward.
Thank you.
Sure.
Is this what we, like the handout you gave us in lab, is it the same method or was it a different method?
Same method, same, yeah. This is just an exercise to practice it. Good? Okay. Just a little bit about licensure. It varies from state to state. And you can check with the extension office. Usually the state extension service handles licensure. So in Tennessee, a certified commercial applicator would be somebody who's working on a farm, large scale. You have to be 18 years old, complete the application exam, and then there's a $150 fee, pass the certification exam, complete the $25 state exam, and at least one category exam. There's several different categories. I did the private pesticide applicator, attend an education seminar, pay $30, $10 to the State Department of Agriculture, and be a private certified. And that's something, guys, that what that education seminar involves is going to the extension office and saying, I want to get the private pesticide applicator certification, and they sit you down at a computer and make you watch some videos and take the little quizzes that go at the end of the videos, and I don't know, I don't remember how long it takes, 2 or 3 hours. You can get that done and put that on your resume if you want to. Okay, that's herbicides. I went through it pretty fast. It's hard for me to drum up a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for it because I recognize that it's really important, but it's kind of not too fun to get excited about the inventive use of poisons. Okay, all right, so let's move on. All of you guys, your management plans are on properties that have given you at least some type of a budget. But there have been times when students have chosen a private property, and I think I told you the landowner said, no budget. I'm not willing to spend any money. I'm willing to let you give me some recommendations on how we can do good stuff for wildlife, but I'm doing you a favor by letting you use my land to do it. I'm not willing to spend any money. Hey, there's things you can do. You can make money off of wildlife to pay to make it better for wildlife, and one way you can do it is by lease hunting. So there's 4 main types of lease hunting contracts. One is a long-term annual lease. And that's what commonly people do around here, for example, like for hunting land on deer or turkey land, okay? It's very common. It's usually a group of hunters. It could be just one hunter. They lease land typically for one hunting season. It might be for one calendar year. It might just be for one species like deer, or for 2 or 3 species like deer and turkey, or for any legal species, just whatever's in the contract. Usually the hunters, approach the landowners. They know the landowners. The payment is known. The cost is known up front. Historically, I guess when I started teaching this class around here, typically deer leases were $3 an acre. Then they went up to 6. I think I've heard of 10 or 12. Do you know? Is that
10 or 12 is pretty common.
right? So 10 or 12 bucks an acre. So 100 acres at $10 an acre, it's $1,000 a year. That could pay for a little bit of habitat management, not scats, but a little bit. And that could go on for year after year, as long as you have an amenable relationship between the landowner and a group of hunters, right? And that, of course, duck leases would be often a whole lot more around here. A duck blind, the season is typically about a 60-day season. Decent duck blinds, 20 years ago around here might be $3,000 to $5,000, but I know folks spend $15,000 to $20,000 or even more for a really good duck blinds around here these days. Is that? Yeah.
Crazy, but it's true.
Yeah, right. So short-term leases are typically for a day, or maybe for a weekend or a week. It's usually for a specific time period and a specific species. So a classic example of around here would be a dove hunt. Okay. Usually the landowner doesn't know the leases. He might, or he or she might or might, but often doesn't. You can even advertise it in the newspaper. Dove field. You drive up and pay the gate. $10 a car, or $5 a head, or whatever, $20 per person. There's potentially a much higher profit, but you don't know how much it's going to be, right? You don't know how many people are going to show up. Whereas with a long-term lease, it's an agreement that you make beforehand. Give me the money and you can hunt this year. There could be guiding and lodging and meals and lots more to it in intensively managed operations. But around here, a dove lease is usually pretty simple and straightforward. The type of animal harvested lease is usually where we have more intensive management, often of farm game operations, high fence operations, where you go down to Texas and pay your $20,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 to hunt, shoot Waldo there, because ear tag number 37. Sorry, I don't have a lot of respect for that. But it's you're paying for each animal. It might be based on the sex, the age, the weight. Sometimes there's an extra fee for how many days you're there. There's a high profit. The landowner might not know the leases. There's a lot of management that goes into those operations. And then a broker outfitter lease is where there's a middle person. So Garrett comes up to me, the landowner, and says, "Hey, are you willing to let me guide people hunting on your property?" And I say yes, and you pay me, and then other people pay you to come guide on my property. So the landowner leases to the outfitter. I don't make as much money because you're doing everything. I'm not having to do anything at all, right? I don't know the hunters. I might not even ever see the hunters. It depends on if I'm there. It doesn't take much from me because the outfitters doing the work. Broker outfitters can work on private lands, but they can also work on public lands as well. So I won't ask that you should know those 4 types of leases, but I won't require that you memorize everything that should be in a lease contract. But I will tell you this, guys, in this litigious age of lawsuits, you should recommend to any landowner that you're advising that if they lease their land for hunting, that they should have a lease contract to avoid litigation. Okay, because there's unless they know and trust the people who are coming onto their land, people will come up with any number of reasons to sue, you know. I stepped in a hole and broke my leg, you know, you didn't tell me there was a hole there. You know, any number of goofy things. So a lease contract should have a lot of stuff. You can Google up lease hunting contract template. Most state extension services have one. Many state wildlife agencies have them. And there's other groups, private groups, NGOs that have them as well. So you can Google up, there's all sorts of templates out there. But it should include the names, the description of the areas, what it's for how long, what species, how will the payment occur, when is it due, is it transferable to other people, can you sublease or not, what are the stipulations, you know, the land is as is. I'm not gonna replant the food plot, or I'm not gonna fix that hole in the fence, or whatever. Yeah, the understanding that everybody's gonna follow the game laws, what will happen if somebody breaches the contract, what's everybody's responsibility, is there a right to renew it if both people are happy, or both groups are happy, how does this end, wording for a notary public to do it right, a liability waiver with hazard areas, and then everybody who's in on the lease signs it, not just one person. So those are 15 things that generally should be in a lease contract, and that you should recommend to a private landowner that they use. Okay, that's leasing. Cost share programs. We've been talking about these off and on this semester. We're talking about private land wildlife management, guys, and there are all sorts of cost share programs out there, and they differ in space and in time. That is, it depends on not only what state you're in, but what part of what state you're in, what's available to you, and they change over time. So what I'm going to share with you is several that have been available in Tennessee in recent years. This, I know it can be kind of dry, but it's still really important. And I want you to understand this real clearly. Wherever you get a job, if you're working with private landowners, you need to learn what are the cost share programs available here now, okay? And know that they'll change. Anytime there's a new farm bill, you need to look and see how has the farm bill programs changed. And the Wildlife Agency and the State Division of Forestry and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and nonprofit groups that have these, they can all change. So it's up to you to keep up with those. There are some states and places that do a good job of keeping up with them, and some don't. Sometimes TWRA has done a good job of keeping a repository of them, other times they haven't. So it's up to you as an individual to kind of know what's available, so you can provide those resources as the expert. So I'm going to talk briefly about each of these. TWRA has a Farm Wildlife Habitat Program. There's a group called the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Foundation. It's a non-governmental organization, a nonprofit group that works closely with TWRA. They have a bank, essentially a wetland bank, called the Tennessee Stream Mitigation Program. Has anybody heard of that before? Have you heard of the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Foundation? Yeah, okay. Tennessee Division of Forestry has a Forest Stewardship Program. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has Partners for Fish and Wildlife. Fish and Wildlife Service also partners with a bunch of other agencies, TWRA and others, DU, to have the Tennessee Partners Project. Tennessee Department of Agriculture has the Agricultural Resources Conservation Fund and the Tennessee Partners Project. Those are one of the partners there. And then the big ones that we've especially talked about is within the USDA. The Farm Bill includes the Conservation Reserve Program. One aspect of that is the continuous sign-up. So we call the original CRP. In the original CRP, there's a sign-up period every year, like in September and the fall. But they added to it a few farm bills ago, so that for some things you can sign up anytime you want, and it's not competitive. Anybody who signs up will get in if they meet the requirements, and that's called the continuous sign-up. So they call that CCRP, Continuous Sign-Up Conservation Reserve Program. Okay, so that's just an aspect of this that a lot of people use. EQIP, and it includes working lands for wildlife. ASEP, this was in the last farm bill, this is new. But what used to be the sibling program to the Conservation Reserve Program, pay attention, the Wetland Reserve Program, it got moved here. And is now called the Wetland Reserve Easements Program, WRE, within ASEP. That's painful, but really important, okay? If you're talking to private landowners, especially where we have wetlands out here in Tennessee. And then there's also the Conservation Stewardship Program, which has been around for a couple of farm bills, but it wasn't funded well the first time, but it's pretty well funded now. A lot of people are using this now. So I'm going to talk about each one of these in turn, okay? How can I help you? How can I help you wake up and pay attention? What can I do?
Chocolate?
Chocolate.
That'd be impressive if you
That's
actually brought
for our
some.
That's not
Get a Tootsie Roll.
yours.
It's Tootsie Rolls. They're not eating the
It's
Tootsie
okay,
Rolls.
I don't care.
You want Tootsie Roll? Sure. Yeah, heck yeah. Tootsie Roll? No? Tootsie Rolls. They're not nasty. Tootsie Rolls are great. There's Whoppers. You want a Whopper? Okay, okay. I'm trying, man. I'm
They're
trying.
good. Yeah, they're
What
good.
about a mini pop? What, a mini pop?
Who are those?
I don't know who's there. You want one? No? Okay, all right.
You said free candy.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying. I know this can be kind of dry, but it is important stuff. Okay. All right, here we go. The TWRA Farm Wildlife Habitat Program pays 3/4 of the cost, reimburses 3/4 of the cost, up to $2,000 a year, to convert to native early successional habitat, and it requires that you keep it in that habitat for at least 5 years. Well, what about, isn't that what the CRP is for? Converting, to native warm season grass? How is this potentially different?
Contract length,
What's that?
the length of the contract.
It's part of it. How else? Could I put my backfield in a CRP if I wanted to next year?
Depends.
You don't know the history of my field.
Right.
I have not row cropped it. It hasn't been row cropped in probably 20 years.
And you can't do CRP.
I cannot do CRP, right? But I could do this, right? So I have to think about things like that. Another consideration is this, guys. The federal government has to be very meticulous with regard to record keeping and contractual obligations. There's a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy. It's kind of a formal process. If I want to enroll my land in CRP, I go to the NRCS office, and instead of taking a right in the main door into the NRCS office, I take a left into the Farm Services Agency, and they handle all the contract and the paperwork, and there's pages and pages and pages. TWRA, many state agencies, in Tennessee, TWRA is this way. They tend to be, this is your agency. I feel like it's mine too, because my dad lived his career in TWRA. They tend to be much more laid back, okay? And that can be good and bad. It can be good and bad. But there's usually not anywhere near as much bureaucracy or red tape or formality to it, and all the good and bad that comes with both of those things are there. So just it is what it is. I'll give you other examples. TWRA in the past has had a wood duck nest box program, where if you agreed, if you had, I think, one box for every 5 acres, if you agreed to maintain those boxes for at least 5 years, they would give them to you for free. And if you ask about them, they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, I think Ed was over that program. Ed retired last year. I don't know if we got anybody over that program right now. There might be a couple left in the barn. You can go check out in the barn and see if there's one. I'll see if somebody can dig up the paperwork for you. That can be often kind of how that goes at the state level. At the federal level, it's much more formal and stuff. But that might have sounded negative the way I said that, but it can be very positive too, because it can happen. Yeah, if you've got them in the barn, yeah, grab a couple. Well, I've got 8 acres. According to that, formal contract, I could only put out one for every 5 acres, so I can only get a couple. It's fine. It's fine. So more laid back can be good too. Okay. The Tennessee Wildlife Resources Foundation used to have a program within it called the Tennessee Stream Mitigation Program. I believe a year or so ago they split apart. So the Tennessee Stream Mitigation Program is separate. The director of that program is Joey Woodard. He's a graduate of our program, and then he went on to Chattanooga and got a master's. So what the Tennessee Stream Mitigation Program is essentially a wetland bank, okay? So here's a probably oversimplified example. Walmart is going to build a new Walmart over on the southeast side of Dresden, let's say. And they're gonna build it down in the floodplain. It's gonna take up about 100 acres of floodplain. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Clean Water Act says for every acre of wetland that you displace, you have to create or improve 2 other acres somewhere else. So they're gonna pave over 100 acres of wetland. So they've got to fix or create 200 acres of wetland somewhere else, okay? They could go to the Tennessee Stream Mitigation Program, a wetland bank. They keep a bank of acreages, of places of acreages that could be restored or wetlands created. So they say, okay, you've got 100 acres in the Middle Fork of the Obion watershed. Okay, we know a landowner who's got 200 acres about 8 miles from there in the Middle Fork of the Obion watershed. You pay this much money, and the Tennessee Stream Mitigation Program will fix those acres on that other property. So if you have acreage that could be, if your landowner has acreage that could be restored, wetlands, or even create artificial wetlands up out of the annual floodplain, then you could tell them and they could say, yeah, okay, when we have somebody who needs to restore wetlands, they'll pay to restore your wetland to make up for the wetland that they're going to destroy. Does that make sense? Okay, all right. So they pay 100% of the cost because it's getting paid by whoever's screwing up the wetland somewhere else. It's a perpetual easement. It means you can't mess with it, and then you can't put it back in the row crops later. There's lots of things you could do. You could put a duck blind on it, hunt it. You could do some maybe timber harvest on it and stuff like that, but it has to stay wetland. Right now in West Tennessee, their focus is on the Hatchie watershed. Any guesses why that might be? I'll give you the watersheds of West Tennessee as they flow into the Mississippi. You've got the Obion, the Forked Deer, the Hatchie, the Loossahatchee, and the Wolf. What's unique about the Hatchie?
It's not been channelized.
It's the only one not channelized, yeah, in the main stem. Some of the upper reaches of it, the tribs, have been channelized. So it has the most intact ecological integrity of all of our West Tennessee river tributaries. So they're trying to keep it that way and restore what has been degraded to it. So it's just a matter of priorities. Tennessee Division of Forestry has the Forest Stewardship Program. This is kind of a simple program. They provide free technical assistance in creating a forest stewardship plan to promote sustainability on non-industrial private forests. So first of all, NIPF, non-industrial private forest, okay? That's private forest land. The forest on my property, that's NIPF. Anybody here got private property, your family have private property with forests on it? That's NIPF, okay? So if you contact them and say, hey, I want you to come and write me up a plan on how to manage my forests. And say, sure, what's your intent? Are you wanting to make money? Are you wanting mass production for deer and turkey? Are you wanting, what is your intent with your forest? And based on your intent, they will write you a recommendation. Leave it alone. Wait 10 years and then do some group selection harvest. Or let's thin it now and thin it again and let's look at it again in 10 years to see if it needs another thin then, or whatever, right? So that's all it is. You have to have at least 10 acres. You have to agree that, well, this plan is going to include soil and water protection. It can deal with wildlife, recreation, timber management, other things, but it doesn't have to. But you have to agree to take care of the soil and water. And then they'll come write the plan for free. They don't implement it. It's just like the plan that you're writing. You just give it to them. It's free of charge, right? And that's all it is. Fish and Wildlife Service has a Partners for Fish and Wildlife program. Now this is for their trust species, which is migratory and threatened and endangered species. Okay, they accept proposals submitted in the fall. They award the best projects in February. You have to commit to it for 10 years. And their focus in Tennessee primarily right now, they have some other areas that they can consider proposals, but it's the Duck River watershed. Why? Because it's the most biodiverse river in Tennessee. Extraordinarily biodiverse. They also have the Tennessee Partners Project, and they cooperate with a bunch of other groups with this one. And this has involved, I'm not sure if this one is active right now. It might not be. It's kind of been declining in recent years, and it might have actually come to a stop, I'm not sure. But they provide the plan, like where to put a levee. They provide a water control structure, like a drop log structure. And they provide technical assistance, for how do you make this happen, to put in a levee for a waterfowl impoundment. It has to be at least 5 acres of surface water, and you have to impound it. They have to be able to look every year to be sure that you're doing it. You can hunt it, but only in the mornings, and that's a deal breaker for a lot of hunters. Okay, and you have to agree to keep it up for 10 years. But this is a program that a lot of people have taken. Tennessee Department of Ag, the Ag Resources Conservation Fund, the ARCF, provides cost share assistance to install best management practices that reduce agricultural water pollution. It may cover up to 75% of the cost to install best management practices. If you've got a landowner that's a livestock producer, what's the first thing you can think of that you might potentially install to improve water quality on their land?
Fences around the farms and lakes.
Fences along the rivers, especially along the rivers. Our rivers are our native aquatic habitats. Yeah. So fencing livestock out of our water, but especially out of our rivers. That's right. Yeah. But that could also be putting in, native grass buffer zones along our streams if it's a row crop land or whatever. All right, then we get to the Farm Bill programs. So the Conservation Reserve Program is for row crop land. Okay, it's to retire generally, historically, erodible land. It doesn't necessarily have to be highly erodible anymore, but that was the original intent. It has to have been row cropped at least 3 of the last 6 years. Okay? Are you with me? It has to have been row cropped what? All right, there we go. Good. Okay, all right. Now historically, this is part of the Farm Bill, and the Farm Bill gets passed, it's supposed to get passed about every 5 years. It's a huge bill. This is what includes the SNAP program, the food stamps, subsidies for cotton growing, and a million other things. It's like over $1 billion piece of legislation. It's huge. Conservation programs is a relatively small part of it, but it's some of the best funding for wildlife habitat. The original Conservation Reserve programs coming out of the 80s and 90s, starting in the 90s, would more likely accept a proposal from a landowner if they said they were gonna convert land to CP, this is conservation practice number 2, which is native warm season grass, or conservation practice number 4D, which is some type of permanent wildlife habitat. I'm gonna show you a list of other conservation practices. There's dozens of them. I'm not gonna show you all of them, and I'm not gonna make you memorize them. But when you see CP, that's what that stands for, okay? The program generally pays for 50% of the cost of converting to whatever you're gonna convert to, whether it's, back in the 80s, a lot of people planted pine plantations, back when you could make a lot of money from pulpwood generation. Not so much anymore. The TWRA, if you're switching to native warm season grass, will pay the other 50%. So you can get it all paid, right? Most options require a 10-year commitment. There are some 15 or 20-year commitments, but most of them it's a 10-year program. Okay. When it rolls out, you can submit to roll it back in again. The continuous sign up is like all this, except there's some criteria that they'll automatically accept. And the primary one is if you've got a strip of land, if you've got row crops next to streams, they will automatically accept putting in a buffer zone between your row crops and the streams, okay? So you don't have to wait until the sign up period in September and submit your proposal and say, will you accept it if I say that I'm gonna do this and I want this much money per year? You don't have to wait for them to say yes or no. You just say, I've got this, and I'm willing to accept this amount of money that you get per acre for this width. It's in, just like that. So that's really nice. There's also an upfront signing incentive of $100 an acre for a 10-year plan, or $150 an acre for a 15-year plan. So just a little teaser to try to get more people. It's riparian corridors, but also field borders. The idea, I think I gave you this before, if in the 1980s, we were trying to restore wildlife habitat, you've got a 20-acre field there, and 5 miles over here, here's another 10-acre field, and 8 miles over here is a 20-acre field. You might have great quail habitat, but quail are our selected species, and metapopulation dynamics is critical. And you've got a covey here, and you've got 2 coveys here, and you've got a covey here, and there's not going to be any movement when you're talking miles and miles and miles apart, right? So instead of paying for 20 acres here, they paid for 10 acres there and 15 acres, 8 acres there, and we start connecting field borders and streamside buffer zones. You're not paying for the same acreage stretches out over a lot more area. If we can just get more landowners to enroll, what you've got then is birds that are moving along these corridors created by these strips, these narrow, long strips. Does that make sense? So they hoped and think that's more effective. And still having these is fine in combination with that to increase that metapopulation dynamics can allow this R selected species that are always moving around to be much more successful. Yeah.
It's 2:55.
Good time.